when you can start looking at things as length of habit and not age, that's malleable. Age is not malleable.
Katy Bowman.
Hi.
Oh my gosh. We're reconnected again.
Reunited and it feels so good.
That's actually not a bad voice. Now I know your mic's working because that was spot on. Do you have a singing background in your career?
Not in my career, but in my career as a human.
Nice. All right. I wish it was in person, but anyway, that'll be sometime in the future. And I've loved your work for so long, especially the slap in the face portion of it for athletes like myself and people in my realm. And I love your quote that we used in the book Primal Endurance, where you called out athletes for having this, quote, lazy athlete mentality, whereby we use these hall passes all the time to sit around for most of the day and not worry about our positioning, which we're going to get into with your new book. But it really hit home for me because, like, my whole life, I've knocked out that awesome, impressive workout, usually first thing in the morning from, being on the team and practicing or being a triathlete and training all day. And then my downtime was spent on the couch with little or no concern for anything except for, chill time. And now we realize, and it's really great to see the fitness industry embracing this idea that fitness is a lifestyle and movement is a lifestyle. And that's where you've always been strong. So I'd love to welcome you, and you can talk about this exciting new book, Rethink Your Position, and anything else that comes to mind.
Starting now. You just want me to riff?
Starting now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I ever use the words lazy athlete mentality because I don't tend to label things like that. But I think fair enough to the people slogging those hard workouts is what the data was showing early on is this all came back on I guess everyone's radar around the sitting is the new smoking, like that you could be an exerciser, a regular exerciser, an athlete even, but you were sandwiched in a lot of downtime, sedentary time. And what they found was people, especially who did those hard workouts, who were training for things, it was like they used up a lot of their day's energy by pursuing that extra hard thing. So I don't even know if, like, athletes, they're coming by their sedentary time, honestly, especially if they're not doing other things like resting and eating in a way that supports their physical endeavors. It makes it hard to uptake more movement outside of their training time. But I guess that's why I started with just going, well, you're going to be sitting down. How about sitting differently? You can sit in a different position, and that's cross training. And that's even part of active recovery a little bit. It's the same thing you would do to stretch out your physical performance competitively.
Yeah. What's been amazing to me is to realize that recovery is optimized when you are moving around more in general everyday life. Because I always perceive the ultimate recovery strategy would be to plant yourself on the couch for hours and hours and eat and watch TV. And you start to realize when you get stiff and creaky and have issues in the aftermath of these killer workouts that you're so proud to accomplish, something's off here where for a long time in my life, I didn't feel like a healthy, vibrant, energetic person unless I got over to the track and did my warm-ups and then started in with some impressive exercise.
Yeah. I think if there's one takeaway for everybody when it comes to movement or movement science, is distribution of movement matters. The distribution of it, like the idea of it being happening throughout the day versus all compressed into one period of time. But that's also part of effective training, whether you're an athlete or just an everyday person wanting to get more out of their body. Distribution is something we need to be thinking about.
It's almost like two separate objectives, where if you have fitness goals, competitive goals, you have to adhere to a regimented training program. But then if you want to be healthy and energetic, and I love how you distinguish between cardiovascular fitness and cardiovascular health, because those are two separate and distinct things. And we know what happens to fitness freaks when they overdo it and come into problems and even increased injury and disease risk. But that objective to just move more in general everyday life, I think, is now coming to the forefront finally.
Yeah. I mean, as it should. I was just thinking about something when you were talking, but I don't know if I can if I can retrieve what it was. It was a good insight, but it might be already gone. Yep, it's gone.
That's what happens when I talk too fast. Yeah.
Well, you're a fast thinker and you're a fast talker.
Well, I think we're hitting on an important concept that might be an awakening for a lot of people, that, they knock off their fitness objectives. They work out for an hour every day or whatever that is, which is an amazing 7 hours per week. We know that there's 168 hours in a week. And so what are we doing the rest of the time to be healthy and energetic? And what did you call it in the book? The chopping up of your movement objectives, whereby sitting on the ground rather than anchoring in a chair can all of a sudden bring in all these wonderful benefits.
Well, actually, I just remembered what I was thinking about was this idea of specialization. We are generalists, and performance is like a specialization of movement. And especially because you're not measuring your performance across a broad number of categories. You're usually looking at the mode that you're most into, right? That's the mode would be like, I'm a cyclist and I'm trying to improve. I'm trying to specialize in being a cyclist, or I'm a sprinter, or I'm a hiker, whatever it is. We're specializing, and specializing is necessary for competition, but it's not great for longevity, right? You have to make trade-offs when you specialize. And so I think a lot of people are more motivated to work on a broader definition in their post-competition phase, because they're like, wow, I don't feel good anymore where I can't even dig into the thing that I specialized in with comfort. It's hurting me. And so like you're losing your flow, your joy. So that's a good motivating factor of distributing movement. And then I try to get athletes or people who are interested in just optimizing performance to have like a bigger movement diet, if they will, not to be super generalized so early on, because I actually think it makes you better at competition before you've retired from whatever your competition is. So, but it's a little bit harder to motivate people who are at the beginning of their journey in specialization, because, just like my kids, like they just they can't imagine a time where they won't be able to do the thing. And actually, I don't know, like, should athletes really just give 100% in the direction of their sport and practice only that? Maybe there's a fire there. There's more than just mechanics. There's more than physiology. It might be mentality. It might be focus. There might be that at play. But in talking about preserving the physical performance, I do think cross-training is the easiest way we hear cross-training all the time, and that's all I'm talking about, right? It's this idea of cross-training. Only I would say that there's a broader way to think about cross-training than most people do. They're like, I'm going to add these two other sports, to this one sport that I'm doing. But again, I'm back to that distribution idea of like, well, we need to distribute movement throughout the day. And maybe you need to be looking at some other movement skills as well that seem radically different than what you're specializing in, for you to objectively see, okay, look, my body can still do some other things. Like I see cyclists where I live, like people, when they get off their bikes, they still look
they're
like
still slouched over.
Yes. And they actually walk like they're pedaling, because the tensions are so strong. They're so specialized. You even see bone density clinically, bone density go down in competitive cyclists, just from the mechanical loads that are there. They're site specific. It's not like general whole body mineralization changes. You're not using your hips in a weight bearing fashion anymore. You're using them to crank out quite a bit of pedaling, but but you're specializing your bones to cycling, and then they don't work as well in walking. And then as you get older, the only movement you can do is cycling, which is great that you still have that. But then it's like, yeah, I can't really go for hikes. My back hurts. The only place like I need to be off my leg. So it's just to get people to think more globally, more broadly about their body and what they're going to want to do with it over time, to be like, this is a toolbox of movement that you're investing in.
There's an amazing study from Tour de France cyclists where in the 3-week duration of the tour, they have a measurable loss in bone density. It's amazing. It's like 20% or something. And in this example, it's because they're never loading their skeleton during that 3 weeks, because they're either sitting on the bike seat or they are resting in bed or on the bus. Yeah. And so they're just, in that binge of activity, they actually have an extreme difference. But I guess a lifelong cyclist who doesn't do a lot of other weight-bearing activities is going to be weak and frail.
Well, I mean, I would love to see that study. You shoot that over to me later on, but it is just that. I mean, there's a lot of bone density studies that are done by NASA, because astronauts have a problem being in a weightless environment. And the way that they test that is by putting people in bed. And then just, you can get paid a lot of money to sit in bed and let NASA look at the effects of decreased loads and like giving people different exercise programs while they're in bed in these low load states. But yeah, that is sort of the Tour de France is like one end of a spectrum, right? It's a hyperbole. It's a moment of seeing like this thing in a really big, clear way. But yeah, if you drive to work, you sit at work for 8 hours, you get on your bike and ride it really hard, like you're physically fit. That would be the more practical version that probably many people are experiencing. Swimming is another one, right? Like you're getting in, you're fit. You have physical fitness. Like anyone on the Tour de France has a tremendous amount of physical fitness, VO2 max and their body composition, and certainly maybe even other areas of strength and flexibility. But there's a trade-off for specializing your movement, and it is the tissues are really needing well-distributed movement, not only throughout the day, but also throughout the body, right? That's the other thing. When you specialize, think about what your arms are doing, when you're cycling. They are not as active as other parts of you. So it's just that. It's just to think about, like, you got to move. You have a movement diet. Are the foods that you're eating in a very narrow range? Like same thing if you had in your dietary diet, you can have good foods, but if you only eat one or two of the same foods, even if they are nutritious foods, you're going to have malnutrition. There are no two single foods that can sustain you over a long period of time. You need a variety of macro and micronutrients, and the same goes for your movement diet as well.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to one's goals and things that they enjoy. And sure. When I was a competitive athlete and training all day for triathlon, of course, I didn't care about broad and varied movement and activity because I was, too focused on the compelling goal. But, I think it's really healthy over time to pursue different challenges and especially notice areas where perhaps you lack competency and you can improve. And it's super exciting to be a novice at something and try to get better and better rather than just grind away at something you're already familiar with, but only if the individual is convinced, like, hey, that racing on the pro triathlon circuit is not aligned with longevity. Oh, it's not? Well, I don't care right now. But, sure. At some point, of course, my goals have transitioned to new competitive aspirations that are disparate from what I did before. And of course, in the background, strongly looming like never before, are these contributing to longevity and reducing disease risk? And I think there's a little bit of fear motivated in there too, because as we talked about just before we hit record, it's like, hey, if you don't do anything about this chronological clock ticking, you're going to have a lot of pain and suffering ahead, rather than envisioning another possibility where you start to work on these broad fitness competencies and movement objectives, nutritious movement, as they say.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly say. Hopefully other people are saying it.
Other people attribute, yes.
Well, and I think there's a couple of things in what you're saying. One is like I imagine a lot of people listening to you are probably people who identify as exercisers and athletes, once an athlete, always an athlete. Even if you're not actively competing, you have that mindset. You know your sport really well. And that sport is the thing that probably brings you a lot of joy in your life. Doesn't not only, but we have found this thing, movement, that is gets us in our flow. And as I've worked with a very broad group of people, I've just realized that, for other people, it's music. For other people, it's art. That while movement is for everybody, it being like what people want to specialize in is not across the board. But that being said, the other part of what you're saying is like, once you've done figuring out what your specialization is, your body is still a reality, right? We have to deal with bodies that need this movement diet that nourishes us, like just to a baseline. And so letting people know, like, it's not necessarily about even competing longer or really living longer. It's just about making sure that you've met your basic needs physically so that you can fully engage with whatever it is that you like about life. Because we've just seeing a drop off of people moving. Like the movement is still dropping off, not only in North America, but globally. And like, I always think of when I see people like on Instagram or social media, and they're working on their bodies, and their bodies are, they're sculpting their bodies with movement. It's the same to me as like watching someone who plays a musical instrument, who's specialized in, look what I can do with my body, right? And so not everyone has specialized in it, but the fact is we keep referring to the specialist who's chosen to specialize in something. I mean, playing the piano is also physical, right? It's a coordination of hands and legs. You are using your body in one particular way. And even if you won't be comfortable later on because you've had something that's fairly static with your body, it doesn't really matter. In the same way it didn't matter to the runner, right? It's like, but I can do this amazing thing physically. I can play all these amazing songs through this coordinated physical effort. Both of those groups would be served. It's like, if you can just meet the non-specialized general needs of your body, you'll be able to engage more in whatever you choose to specialize in, whatever it is, whether it's teaching
Tour de France
to setting up a preschool, like, and just be fully engaged in it, right? Like, it's just that we've wanted to sort out like things that we perceive as movement-based tasks and things that we don't, but really everything we do is through this physical body. They're all movement-based tasks. They all just have they use different shapes of our body, and they use different contractions to our muscles, but they are all physical. We are all on this physical spectrum, and we could all benefit from an understanding of just, how can I be positioning myself all the time, not when I'm specialized, but especially around that specialized time, in a way that supports me so that my mind is healthier too, not only physical, the mental health benefits. Because like when you're in pain, you're not able to really engage. Like you're managing so much pain on the inside that you're not able to give 100%, because 40% of you is paying attention to what's going on and going around that. And so like, that's what I'm just interested in, is helping everyone get to a baseline. Maybe it helps you with your athletic performance. Maybe it helps you with your musical performance. Maybe it helps you with your time with your family. Maybe it helps you be more focused at work, whatever it is for you. I don't really care, but these are some of the building blocks of movement that the body needs, and I'd like to show them to you.
It also brings to mind another pillar of your lifestyle, which is that engagement with nature, the importance and the value. And my question comes when you encounter people that are deficient in both movement and by association, time in nature. And it seems to me like my concern with society in general is like we've forgotten how awesome it is to go out and take a walk or go on a hike or jump in a lake. And when we're disconnected, and instead using all this time to engage with digital screen and so forth, how do you tackle that challenge?
Well, in the same way that we tackle our lack of movement, right? Like, I think probably 40 years ago, 50 years ago, there was, I'm not speaking from North American history, like this idea of like, wow, like people aren't moving. And this idea of exercise came on, right? And there was like running was a hobby, right? Like these weren't things that people did because people still walked a lot of places. They did, they were using their body physically regularly throughout the day just to meet their basic needs. I mean, certainly that's been falling off for a long time, but if I just look at the difference between my generation and my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation, it's accelerated the rate that it's dropping off. And just since I've had kids, since, like a smartphone in 2010, from 2013 years, it's radically dropped off even more. So this is not like, well, movement's been going for a long period of time. Yes, it has, but it's accelerated at this point. Like we're just like throwing it out the window. And so it's really hard to look. Well, I guess it's not hard. What we need to do is look at this decreasing movement problem and see it alongside this other problem, which is our parents and grandparents, in doing all the things for their body, were also doing a lot of them outside, right? Mm-hmm. They were just outside more because this is like philosophical. What is life? What is going on? Like we are just living in these dwellings, and the time that we spend in the dwellings keeps getting longer.
93% says a British survey.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, 86% indoors and 7% in a vehicle.
Yeah, and thus, and also like not only have we spent more time, it will say inside, whether it's in your car, in your house, in your office, but inside, you're not outside, you're inside. Thus, we need to make all of our dwellings larger. Right? So now, and it's so logical in our mind, it's like now everyone needs their own room and now the cars have to get bigger, right? So there's like this natural progression to just increase the size of inside so that nobody ever has to go outside. And that is very much lockstep woven through our relationship with movement. Our relationship with nature and our relationship with movement can't really be separated all that easily, because everything that we need, that we are trying to bring inside our dwelling, including what the dwelling is made of, comes from nature. It comes from outside. So we're just like, we got to get more things from outside and bring them inside, because outside, by definition, has everything that you need. But you are inside now. So then you need a duplicate, and every single person needs their own duplicate things that I need to be brought inside. And so this nature deficit, that people have, we tend to tackle it in the same way that we tackle exercise. So when exercise came on the scene, is like, hey, there's a way to supplement your body. You didn't move your dwelling. It doesn't have you moving your body anymore. So let's supplement. Let's drive to another inside space and take some dose of vitamin cardio and vitamin stretching and vitamin strength training. Like we're pulling in exercises that are themselves beneficial, but they have very little context outside of they're the thing that we need that make us better. We always leave off the other half of the sentence, which is, to replace what we used to get outside. Like it's always just like, oh, we need this. No one ever knew that we needed this before. And so now it's had to be invented. It's had to be discovered. And it's like, well, all these things are very, very old. They've never existed inside the dwelling. And the same thing goes for nature. Now you're going to see people, we've pulled out vitamin get in cold water and have bought get the cold water tub, and do this as a thing, just in the same way we do our cardio as a thing, and climb a tree, or forest bathe, like it's just, instead of missing, we're not seeing sort of like the relationship of like these broader choices that we're making as a society is requiring a tremendous amount of supplementation. We're supplementing movement, we're supplementing nature, we're supplementing community, like trying to figure out people who are isolated. It's like, well, maybe they can interact with an Alexa to supplement their, you know what I mean? Like we need to acknowledge like this is not meeting our needs. And in the same way, if you went into your kitchen cupboard and opened it and there was 100 supplements there, if you had no knowledge that all those came from food, I'm talking about dietary supplements, it would be like, well, maybe you could eat some food that would have some of this in this, because all these supplements actually have no calories. So you're getting all of the nutrients, but none of the calories. And all the other things that were found in food aren't there. And the same is going for our approach to like movement and nature.
There she goes. All right.
There it was.
And now we're on to...
Okay, let's start.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it's not to criticize people making devoted efforts to supplement the deficiencies.
No.
But I do think in the fitness industry, especially, the complexity is in the interest of profit. And we don't realize, or we've been talked out of the idea that we can go outside and in 5 minutes get a fantastic total body challenging, strenuous workout, and then return to our busy day indoors. But instead, we've been programmed that we need to sign up for a book of 12 personal training sessions, or go to the 6 a.m. class and, sweat in a big pool on the bicycle. And that's what is equated with fitness in our social programming. So I like the idea of, we've been complaining about some of the modern trends, but like the solution is these baby steps forward, where you go outside, and if it's raining, that's okay, whatever the weather is, and you challenge yourself with a set of squats up and down the bench, and that actually counts, and that's awesome. It doesn't have to be an hour-long sweat fest.
No, and yeah, to your earlier point, like, it's not to criticize supplementation. Like, supplementation is sort of a gift, right? The idea of supplementation, because especially in dietary supplementations, sometimes the world might have even stopped producing the thing. You know what I mean? Like, we've done a number on a lot of things, humans have. And so supplementation is a solution. But it's sort of like when you're trying to fix something in your body, you can do the therapy, but you also want to look and make sure that you're not also continuing to do the thing that got you in the position where you needed the therapy, which happens quite a bit. As a biomechanist, they're like, oh, this is a problem with my knee. And so I'm like adding all these treatments. It's like, great. But also I noticed that the way you walk, or the shoe that you wear, whatever it is, this chair that you have, like, this is part of why this keeps popping up. So if you want the solution, do the therapy, but also remove some of what you're doing that's creating it. It's illuminating. People are like, I had no idea that this was related because I've always done this. It's like, yeah, well, everything in the body can be done for a really long time and then it breaks. Like, the fact that you've been doing something for a long time is no indication that it has been working for you. It just got you to this particular point. So I like 6 a.m. classes where you can sweat it. I think that's great. But my point is, our lives are so busy and full that you will never be able to get enough supplementation to make up for replacing all of nature without changing some portion of your life. Like, you would have to say, like, this amount of supplementation is overwhelming. And I think for most people, it's too expensive, right? It's like, that's the other thing, is it's so expensive to get all the things that you need. It really leaves a lot of people behind if you have a supplementation only approach. Supplementation is fine. And there are also simple, not always easy, but simple, inexpensive ways where you could be working on your well-being and your movement diet by just like sometimes you don't even have to go outside. Like that can be a pretty big step, but by looking at what does outside give me in my body, and at first trying to get a little bit more of that more complex movement inside of your house. And then it just becomes something where you can start getting a little bit more outside. You know, if you're going to sit down and read something, try it outside. That's a different movement, right? All this natural light that we talk about, we need for our well-being. That does not mean sitting next to a window with natural light. Your glass is blocking the full spectrum of natural light. You have to go outside to get natural light. And just many other examples like that. Temperature variation, terrain shape variation, other people, you know, you have to get them out of the house. Like there's just a lot of things going on outside that are beneficial to us.
And so with the latest book, Rethink Your Position, a lot of great tips and strategies to use inside and outside. But I think particularly with the focus that we are obligated to spend a lot of time indoors, interacting with screen and so forth, maybe we could get into, I guess, the essence of what the book's about. And I especially love like the idea, I've now, inspired by you, have numerous work areas throughout the day. And I don't feel bad about it anymore. I don't feel like a short attention span. I keep changing rooms and going from stand up to sit down, but especially sitting on the ground has been my new favorite because it has so many positive health benefits in comparison to disengaging your skeleton in a chair. So let's get into the new book. Congratulations. Rethink Your Position, people.
Thank you. I'm stoked on this book.
I wanted my high jump logo on the cover. So I'm disappointed about that, but maybe like on the next printing you can throw on, because there's all these little figurines on the cover, a bicycle rider, this person, that person. How about a high jumper? One vote for the high jumper on the next cover.
Well, that's funny. There was just a high jumper, and we do these Move Your DNA weekends where you can come study for 2 days with someone to help you like break down all your parts. And they were a pole vaulter.
Ooh.
So there you go. Like, yeah, it's two votes. Gymnast on the front. Not gymnast.
Right on.
Track athlete.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
I don't think I froze.
We froze. We're back, and we have Rethink Your Position now on the bookshelves. Signed copies directly from nutritiousmovement.com, right?
Not signed. Maybe if you want to sign one, just let me know.
Yeah.
That book was definitely written for the times. I think of us as sort of in social media times right now where we like short bits, you know, not tremendous deep dives, like not at once, shorter attention spans, not so much shorter attention spans, but like having small periods of time where I can learn a particular thing. So the book is written in short essays where you just learn one thing at a time about your body. It's organized by body parts so that you don't even have to read it cover to cover. You can open it up and be like, knees, pain and downhill knees. Oh, okay. You know, like that's my essay. So I was just really big photographs, just trying to make it fit the format that people seem to be really comfortable with right now.
That's a really nice way of saying that we have a disastrously shortened attention span in modern life. And I'm listening to another book, Stolen Focus, where he goes into detail about how our brains have been reprogrammed by the giant social media providers. Is pretty disturbing. And I can definitely relate to that, where sitting down and reading a book, which was like a centerpiece of my life decades ago, now it's like taken over by tidbits on the screen. Things like high jump videos or jumping into Katy's chapter about knee pain going downhill. I just sent that excerpt to my mom, by the way, because she complains about knee pain going downhill. So it's useful in that way. But I think if you go through from head to toe, the way it's organized, you get some really good takeaways that can help. I don't know how you probably describe it better, but like everything we do, there is an element of optimization from sitting in a chair, which surprisingly Katy Bowman allows everybody, but as long as as long as there's some variation in the day. And maybe we could hit that topic about workplace variation and how important it is to just change up rather than be fixed positions.
Yeah, flexible seating. I'm a big fan of flexible seating, and that goes for classrooms for kids, goes for your workstation, and it goes for like even the way you take your entertainment at night. So the nice thing about flexible seating is it's one of those, again, low cost solutions. So if we talk about like nature, there's no chairs in nature. There are definitely things to sit on that are not the ground, but those things vary in height. They don't often have a back that allows you to like relax and drop back. So there's a lot more active sitting in nature, as well as ground sitting. Just getting up and down from the ground is a regular feature of what happens outside. Just think of going camping, think of going to a picnic, especially when we haven't brought in all the human made stuff into all the spaces where it's like, here, come outside, but don't get on the ground. And so, yeah, you can adjust just the way you set up your home for more of that natural phenomenon of active sitting, but happening inside your house. So I have like flexible seating for your workspace is this idea of wherever you do your work, try to make sure you've got at least a couple different positions. 3 would be great that you can utilize while you're producing, while you're in front of a computer. So if you have a laptop, you can move to something low. Floor desk is my favorite. It's also the one that I need the most. It's this really good hip stretch. Again, that idea of cross training. I do a lot of upright walking. And so my standing muscles are very, very strong and resist oftentimes floor sitting positions, right? So we're all adapted to what we do most often. Standing work desk, I don't really need as much because and like I said, like I already get a lot of vitamins standing. And then
standing and walking.
And just I'm on my feet a lot. Like I do a lot of teaching, a lot of presentation. That's like a whole body standing thing. So everyone needs to assess what their movement diet is and what are the movements that they need. Again, if you're a cyclist, you probably get a lot of already sitting flexed hips. So standing would be a good solution. Coming down to the ground, again, varying through different leg positions is helpful. Yeah. And doesn't have to be on the ground, some cushions down there. It's just this idea of if you're always moving, your training muscles, your sitting muscles are really well trained. And so you want to cross train a little bit. So you cross train during some of your sitting time. Same thing goes for taking in your media at night or your entertainment. Like if you go to the same chair or the same spot on the couch, you're already pretty good at that movement. So the idea of like, I'm going to sit on the ground in front of the chair and I'm going to cross my legs or I'm just going to stretch my legs out wide and stretch my hips while I'm watching Netflix or whatever it is that you're doing in the evening, reading a full book, perhaps.
Imagine that. So when you're sitting on the ground, describe the difference between that and sitting in a chair, because we're both sitting, but there's this ground reaction force. Is that what it's called? Where you're actually getting some muscle and lymphatic stimulation from your body weight on the ground?
I would say, let's break it down this way. Let's start in a chair in our minds. So the chair is supporting the weight of your entire body. And then oftentimes our torso is leaning back. So you're not even holding up your torso. Like the muscles of your torso are not even holding up your torso. The chair is doing everything. If the back of the chair disappeared, you'd flop back to the ground, right? If the chair were to disappear underneath your hips, you'd drop down, straight down to the ground. So the chair is usually doing 2 things for people. So if you just sat in your same old kitchen chair or your same old office chair and scooted forward and held up your own torso, you would be sitting more actively than if you were letting your back rest against the chair. So one is torso position. How active is it? That's why people sit on balls, is because if we just look at the torso, it's this idea of you are actually holding yourself up. It's like an abdominal contraction being done the entire time you're in a chair. So if you're just sitting and you're resting, just scoot up, just scoot forward. The second thing is the chair you tend to use the same shape in a chair again and again. There's nothing that says you have to, but you're just used to it. Probably when we started in school, we were not allowed to sit cross-legged and do all these things in a chair. So you just learn 2 feet flat on the ground, center your hips, and that's the form that we use when we sit in a chair. But you could be more active, not only with your torso, but if you cross one leg over your right leg over your left knee, or vice versa, or sat cross-legged in a chair if that worked for you, if the chair shape worked for you. And in that way, you would be doing the same thing that you'd be doing if you were to do those stretches. So that period of time that you're sitting is also stretching your piriformis, stretching your glute muscles out, stretching your hamstrings, you can change your shape to get more motion happening. When you sit on the ground, you're usually losing your rear support, not your rear, the support that's behind you. And then also the ground is so spacious, you can use a lot more leg position when you're down there, so that you're able to do a lot more of those leg stretches. And of course, we didn't talk about squatting, but just squatting down, that's actually a very popular way that a lot of the world sits. And that's the most active. To sit in a squat is the most active, but it is not the most practical. It's not the most achievable too for most people who grew up in chairs, but it's all about what's your muscular effort while you're doing something. Plus, sitting on the ground requires that you use your body to get down to the ground and then butt up out of the ground. So it itself is an exercise, just getting to the seat and getting back out of it.
So again, not to go crazy here, but just making these little tidbits of effort where instead of being glued to your $800 ergonomically perfect chair, which is not inherently bad, as you point out often, it's just one position. But the most restful and disengaging position, you deserve to rest there for a certain period of your day. But I think when we get away from optimal is when we're just relying on these things nonstop or over relying on them in some cases because we did that awesome hour workout from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. And now we're just going to, sink into something that deloads the skeleton, the muscles. And so just, making little sprinkling here, it feels like a good path for everyone to aspire to, and that can, improve overall musculoskeletal health and so forth, provided you hit some of these checkpoints as presented in Rethink Your Position.
Yeah, well, it's form, right? We think of you are always in a form. You can always, we talk about optimization. You can think about this, is my form optimal for what I'm doing? We're trying to optimize form. And it's because the form is going to optimize the load. But again, optimize is always going to be dependent on what your goals are. So I would assume for a lot of people, their goal is to sit down to work, but they also have this other goal of using their bodies more. So it's okay, well, what's a form that I can get my work done and use my body more? Okay, it's going to be in this form where you are going to choose a more active seat. So you just are always thinking about what's my goal here? And then is there a form that I'm using, a shape to my body, a choice about how I'm going to position myself, whether it's in a chair or on the ground or standing with my head down in front of me, or am I going to keep the upper back active while I'm looking at my computer screen? These are form choices. And I think that most people just don't know how to toggle their joints enough to tap into all the form that actually is available to most anatomy. We haven't even thought about it. It's been completely off the radar. They're this is just how my body is. It's how my body moves. And it's sort of. Right. It's not, we haven't been moving mindfully. No one has really shown you how all of these hinges work. Once you learn how a hinge works, you're whoa, I didn't know. When I stand, every time I stand, it hurts my left foot because I'm right on top of my Morton's neuroma and blah, blah, blah. I'm well, let me show you how to stand in a different way. Did you know right now you're actually wearing your hips 40 degrees forward in that hip joint. Like, why don't you do this? And then they're like, no one ever told me to shift my weight back in my heels when I was standing. So it's just, we're not very fluent in ourselves, in our physicality. We can be great at a sport. We can be great at using our body in our labor or the work that we do. But it's sort of like looking at handwriting and being like, wow, every time I make an O, it sort of looks like an I. Like, we haven't practiced all of the letters enough so that when we go to say something, it's really not clear what's happening there. The form of everything isn't as crisp as it could be. So when you just for fun start exploring all of these separate body parts in very short essays, you start to learn, like, I didn't even know that was a letter my body could make. I didn't even know I could bring that vowel sound to this movement conversation I was trying to have. And so it's just that there's a lot of you have a lot of parts. Modern living calls on certain parts over and over again and completely neglects other ones. And while we are all unique in our bodies are mostly the same, even though they have like these little nuances here or there. They're all mostly the same and can really benefit by just looking at these baseline where we are the same and make sure that we are all aware of, like, that your toes spread, that your toes lift individually, right? This can be like mind-blowing for people. Even when they're tremendous athletes, their feet can be very atrophied and eventually be part of what hurts their knees and hips. And it's like, did you know your toes move like this? It's like, no, I had no idea. It's like, okay, do this. These are muscles. These are musculoskeletal muscles. And you're putting your whole entire body on top of these untrained muscles that you never thought about, because you put them in your shoes and your shoes are on the pedals. Your shoes are on the ground. Your shoes are on the exercise machine. It's like, yeah, but your feet weren't really getting any exercise. They were just being supportive of the rest of you getting their exercise.
Encased in modern footwear and deactivated from how they're supposed to work, how important it is. But a nice little plug for minimalist footwear. I'm going to send you a pair of new Palooza shoes. They're so awesome with the articulated 5 toes as a nice, compromise to the fact that we can't walk around barefoot all day. But I know many people are listening, not watching, but I think maybe you could describe something like the head ramp, and I think we could pick it up just with the audio description as a way to counteract the demands of modern life that are causing us to hunch over and slump forward all the time.
Yeah, well, it's just, so if you think about your upper spine, your head is dropping forward out in front of your shoulders. So when you do that, it rounds your upper back. And then not only is your upper back forward, you're also usually lifting your chin to look forward. If you have bifocals, right, looking through the bottom of your bifocals, so that not only humps over your upper back, really rounds forward, it means that the spine just above your upper back, the cervical spine, the spine of your neck, goes in the opposite direction. So you've created this sort of deep S-curve between your upper back and your cervical spine. So we want to get rid of that for many reasons. And so the way that you can adjust, so if you imagine looking at your phone screen, you're looking at your computer screen, you're reading a book, you're working on knitting, whatever it is, you're going to keep your chest where it is, but you're going to slide your head up towards the ceiling while also moving the head back towards the wall behind you at the same time. So your head's going up and it's moving back so that eventually the ears sit over the shoulder instead of your whole head being out in front of you. And then once you're back there, you can actually turn your head to the right and to the left, and you can drop your right ear towards your right shoulder and your left ear towards your left shoulder, but you're always adjusting your head position first. You don't want to have your head forward and do all the neck stretches
with a compressed spine. Yeah, no good.
Right, for sure. Like, you want to free up those hinges for rotating. So yeah, it's just back your head and lift your head up at the same time without lifting your chest. If your chest goes, then you're actually moving your lower back. You're not moving the upper back. And that's what we want. So put your hands on your sternum. You know, if you have a necklace that's like at the front of your chest, the front of your rib cage, put your hands there. Don't let those hands move. And then slide your head back and your head up. And you'll get a nice stretch in the muscles that run down the front of the neck. maybe if they're tight.
And we could possibly avoid getting shorter as we age,
That's
as
the
you
thing.
talk about. Amazing.
Oh, that was one of the essays, right? Because I'm looking to find your motivation. Whoever's listening, everyone is motivated by something specific, and they're not motivated by all of the other things. And so I have to keep saying the same ideas in different ways, hoping that I find your key, the thing that unlocks you. Like, yes, I'm interested in that. And so one of the essays is about taking my dad to the doctor when he was almost 90, and they will track height. I mean, I guess they track height anytime you go to the doctor, but they're looking at height changes, and maybe it's I know they do in kids, and then because they want to be like, oh, okay, that could be hurting your back. There could be bone health issues here. But the point that I was making in this particular essay is, if you think of your full height and measure, let's say you measure at 6 feet when you're all the way up, and your head and your spine curls forward, you're now shorter. And then the more you do that, and the stiffer your muscles become, and then the stiffer your spine becomes, the more you do that, the harder it is to get back up out of that height ever. So a lot of our height, when we think of height loss, we tend to think of, I was 6 feet and now my spine has squished straight down. And that's where those couple inches have gone. And there's nothing I can do about that because all the discs are out of fluid and everything's compressing. My point is, geometrically, what's more likely is you've curled forward. Your length has not changed. The length of your body has not changed, but it's curling out in front of you. And so the total height of your length above the ground is less. That's pretty motivating to the idea of, like, you can get that height back a lot of times. And then if it is, there can be changes to the spine where your height can come because of compression. But what's interesting is it's often being curled forward for a long time that makes those changes that result in compressive. So no matter who you are, work on head ramping, right? That's going to be what gets that height back, and which can stop these loads in the vertebrae and in the discs that can end up permanently changing their shape.
Right. And so we see examples of permanently changed shapes with people with terrible posture and the neck sticking out and the shoulders are hunched. But as we work toward this exciting goal of correcting that, we certainly have the potential even to mobilize the spine further. You talk about the spine stretches that we want to do every day. And so you're saying just by the getting the proper nutrition to the muscles and joints and connective tissue, we can work backwards from all these age-related things that we think are out of our control.
Well, it's very hard to separate age from length of habit, duration of habit.
That's great.
And so that is the clinical marker that's usually wrong in articles that attribute things to age, because they're not controlling for length of habit, and length of habit is really there. And so when you can start looking at things as length of habit and not age, that's malleable. Age is not malleable. So, like, I tend to never use the term, because our habits, our lifestyles they're not that great for our body. So when you can make the whole thing really clear, like, we've got a length of habit issue, that's malleable, right? That's positive. That's something where you can be like, yes, okay, right, got that. All right, I can change the habit today.
I love it. Length of habit. Forget about aging. It's length of habit. Happy length of habit to you. Happy length of habit to you. Happy length of habit.
Right? You don't want those, like, you want to break up old habits that aren't getting you to where you want to be going.
Start a new habit today. Yeah,
start a new
exciting.
Habit. Baby habits. You want these baby habits. Like, we don't want old habits. We want baby habits at this point.
So you've worked hard over time to minimize your bedding experience, which I'm with you. I like the minimalist pad, especially when I'm by myself. I'm just down on the ground with a 1-inch pad. But the lack of a pillow I'm curious, like, how do you manage that and counter the common notion that we want a pillow to be the exact height between our shoulder and our neck so that our head can sleep, like on the pictures of the
When you're
expensive
sleeping on your
pillows.
sides, right?
Right.
I guess it's like this, right? So trying to if this was all visual, it'd be so much easier. So let's just start the model on our back. So I guess to give context to what you're saying, I'm a floor sleeper. Although when people hear that, it's like
She's a floor sleeper.
I'm not throwing a sheet down on a cement floor. You know what I mean? Like I have sheepskin, I've got a flannel sheet, I've got my body and another flannel sheet and a big comforter. It is like super
It's heaven.
cozy. Yeah, it's heaven. So don't be feeling sorry for me. And it's luxurious. It's comfortable. It's warm. It's cozy. What it isn't is very cushioned. That's the only thing that's not there. It's not very cushioned. And so what that does is what does cushion do? I guess before we ask what does floor sleeping do, cushion allows you, when cushion means that what the surface that you're going to go on molds to you. You don't have to mold to it. So if I take my spine that's been curled forward and my hips that have been flexed all day, when I take that shape into my bed, the bed accommodates a lot of that shape and does not require that I change that shape as much as getting on the floor does. The floor is like a taskmaster, right? The floor is like, sorry, if you want to be down here, you are going to have to bring your shape to me. I cannot bring my shape to you. And so you have a question there?
Yeah, you better take that excess curvature out of your lumbar spine because you're not going to be comfortable on the floor until you rethink your position and get used to it. I'm sure there's a learning curve, but it seems like a person could progress like you talk about, where you don't go down to the floor tomorrow, but I don't know, maybe it's a steady progression where it
is a progression over time. Like you would already be working on, just like, oh, I'm going to stretch, I need to stretch more. Like it all depends on where you're starting from. Like if you were very stiff and immobile, it would be pretty extreme to go from like you're not even moving your body gently for short periods of time. You're not going to get down and move it extremely for 8 hours. So yes, there is a progression there, and that progression's outlined on my website. You can find that there. So now let's put a pillow behind my head though, because when I'm on my back, the head being at the same height as the rest of the body is fine, right? Like if I'm on my back, having something beneath my head that's pushing me right back into my same phone position, not necessary. But that's not what people are usually asking about. They're asking about, well, what about when I'm on my side? Because that commercial for pillows is on your side, right? It's like, here's your shoulder width. So if you put something that's exactly the width of your shoulders, and your head and neck don't have to like bend or stretch, you're not going to get a kink in your neck. That all makes perfect sense. And my kids have watched this commercial before, and they're like, because they know what we do and why. And they're just like, oh, look, like, so they're like, they are saying that your shoulders don't move and that your neck is not supposed to move. Like those are the assumptions. So I'm pretty mobile. So when I lay on my side, my shoulders come pretty close. I mean, I do have broad shoulders, but my shoulder width when I'm standing is not my shoulder width when I'm lying on my side, right? The distance between my shoulders becomes quite narrow.
Yeah, right? One shoulder's pressing into the ground and one shoulder's loading onto your...
They both fold forward. Yeah. Like if you wrapped your arms around and gave yourself a big hug, your shoulders come in pretty closely. And then the reason I actually went, and I put this in the book, the reason I went to pillowless sleeping over time, reducing the height of my pillow over time, is because I had a lot of headaches, and they were tension headaches, and they were coming from stiffness in my upper body. And the stretches that I was given to relieve them, it was a time factor. It was like, I keep trying to mobilize this area. It makes me feel better. But every night I go back and prop something underneath there, so then the whole thing stays stiff again. And I would wake up stiff. I wouldn't wake up with a kink in my neck. I would wake up stiff. And I was like, okay, well, what if I got rid of the prop and allowed my neck to sort of be more mobile throughout the night? And then I woke up more mobile. Now, just like exercise progression, I changed the height of my pillow over time. So I did not go from like massive neck stretching for multiple hours, because if I did that during the day in a class, we're going to come here for 6 hours and do these neck stretches, you would feel wrecked the next day. Same goes for trying to make a transition to a pillow. So I just decreased the height of my pillow over a year. Sometimes I even will like to sleep on a folded t-shirt. Like sometimes I like half of an inch.
Just some random thing that she grabs on the way, a washcloth.
Oh, it is. I mean, it's often just a piece of clothing on the floor. I'm like, I just want a little bit of support tonight, because again, bodies go through, I could have had like a big workout, I could have been caring, I could have been gardening. So I'm always give myself that grace of like, I will reach for the support when I need it, but I'm not going to start off assuming that my body has no ranges of motion that can be improved. And so that's a little bit about my sleeping journey. And I swear by it. For my well-being, we just got back from living in Central America for 4 months in a tropical environment, in an open air home with a lot more bugs and dangerous things on the ground that I did not have the skill set to drop in and deal with. There's people who do all the time, but I didn't, just being novel. And after sleeping on a bed, not a pillow, because you don't need a pillow, but I didn't need a pillow, but I feel so much better getting back to my floors. Like that's how important it is to my physical training. Like it was a massive multiple hours of movement of a particular type that I was getting. And my spine just feels, my hips and my spine all the way to my head just really benefit from that setup.
Yeah, I guess there's the Katy route, which is to put some work in and progress over time. And I guess the rest of the population is purchasing ever more comfortable beds, braces, pillows, and it's kind of an insight you can extrapolate to everything in terms of being physically fit. That we are just kind of going into a crutch mode all night, every night.
Well, we solve problems by adding stuff. We're like, this gear must be wrong. Like, I think because we're such a hyper consuming gear focused industry, wellness is a gear focused industry. Your assumption is the stuff that you have is wrong. So let me get new stuff, where I'm like, the stuff thing is new, people. It's the stuff thing is new. Like hasn't been around for a long time. So don't look for the solution always in the stuff. I mean, we all need stuff, but we don't need as much of it as we need. And chances are, especially when it comes to movement, minimalism of stuff is usually maximalism of the body. So it means that you have to do more. Like you have to bring more, you have to move more. And so fewer chairs, more hip movement, more leg movement, not less. So it is minimal stuff, but it maximalizes what you have to bring and produce in your structure.
I know you've made up a lot of words in the biomechanist community, but I like that maximalism. That could be a good episode title. You just maximize the body so you can minimize all your reliances on cushy support devices. Yeah,
I've tried to get on the minimalists to discuss this idea.
Yeah.
It's like we're avoiding less. I mean, the avoidance of less stuff might simply be because we're physically not there yet. And so if we could think about it, our physical training as a way to less stuff, that's a different key. It's a different key for people who are like, I wasn't interested in minimalism until you talked about its relationship with my physicality. Now I'm interested. So
love it. Katy Bowman, killing it. And before we let you go, I want to ask you about your writing process, because you've just released this. It literally is the umpteenth book, and the rate of production is so impressive, and the sense of humor that comes through. You have a good time doing it. So tell us, for those of us interested in writing, how are you able to crank out at such an amazing rate and still enjoy it and still find fun topics to discuss and all that?
I think I probably am just a writer first. Like it might just be that where it wasn't so much like I was doing other things and thought like, oh, I should put them down in a book. That would be great. I think I'm just a writer, just someone who processes. I process through the word. I process through the spoken word. I process through the written word. It's in laying it down through that medium that actually helps me solidify my understanding. Because as you're trying to articulate something, and then you get to this spot and you're like, how can I say this more concisely? And then you realize I don't know it well enough to be able to say
yeah.
it. And that, so it's, I think that my writing is probably more the exhaust of me learning, not the other way around. I mean, I certainly had a big base when I went into it, but for me, the process, when I want to know something really well, I will sit down to write it. And then that is part of what pushes me to question what I know.
Well said. I think you could do a writing seminar starting with that theme right there. The exhaustive learning is writing. I could totally feel that, especially when there's like deadline pressure where I remember when we were, researching and writing the keto reset diet at high speed because we needed to get it to market because it was so important because keto was rising as a trend. And like, I didn't know what I was writing about. I didn't understand what I was writing about, but the process of writing about it, then you read the paragraph that you just wrote that you don't know what the hell you're talking about and you kind of start getting it. It's really, it's a great way to, it's kind of like memorizing the vocabulary terms for the test. The best way by far is to write it out by hand over and over and over.
Yeah, I get it is for me. You're just looking at my exhaust. It's the wake that's going, through my mind.
Just order some more exhaust from Katy with her new book, Rethink Your Position. Thanks so much for spending time with us. It's great to connect and get these insights.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Brad, always.
And nutritiousmovement.com is the best place to go to connect with everything, and your wonderful Instagram site with so much nature and inspiring activity. Tell us what you did on was it your 44th birthday or something like that?
Well, that was many years ago. This was for my 47th birthday. I always walk to celebrate my birthday. I'm a big fan of dynamic celebrations. And so, yeah, I walked 47 kilometers this time because I was in Central America. So it was easier to map it out that way. And also it was 47.
Right on. Happy birthday. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, friend.
Katy Bowman, everybody. Da, 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 da.